Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity. We're here continuing my top 25 favorite episodes of Star Trek. I was going to say the Next Generation, but the entire franchise of Star Trek. We're getting now to my number 21, which is an episode of Star Trek Next Generation, Frame of Mind. And joining me to talk about this episode, Darrin from D's Reviews. Darrin, thanks so much for joining.
Hey, Mark, glad to be back here. This is a great classic episode. There's a lot of fun stuff that goes on, and I got to say, I'm a sucker for any kind of identity reality issues that go on, so it's already kind of got me sold.
Awesome. Now, I should bring up that Don was supposed to be joining us tonight, but he's unable to make it because of health issues. So I hope he's okay. But we're going to carry on with the two of us and talk about this great episode. But first, Darrin, I wanted to ask you about your hashtag, the SAG-AFTRA strike and the writer's strike going on. So, well, the question I had is: are you actually a member of the Actors Guild?
I actually am. I've been a member of SAG, which is now SAG-AFTRA, for like 30 years now.
Oh, wow.
I've paid them a lot of dues over the years. But I'm a big supporter generally of unions. I mean, America is a very business-oriented country. Sorry. And oftentimes they tend to have a lot of the power to set up laws and rules and connections. They have the money and they're able to really call the shots a lot of times. Unions have historically in this country been the one way that the workers have been able to fight back, to work collectively, to get better contracts. It's because of unions that we have weekends. It's because of unions that we have overtime. It's because of unions that we have sick days. These are all things that unions have put for. And with the advent of AI now, and we saw as soon as ChatGPT came out, a lot of the language models, it was immediately discussions of replacing things. A lot of just general workers, people on help desks are being replaced by chat bots now. The actors and the writers have been very concerned about these things, and there's been a lot of stuff with the move to new media. Streaming is an entirely different platform. It's very nebulous. The information on how many things are watched and how long and stuff, very different than the old Nielsen system, the old television broadcast system, which had a much more kind of straightforward way of keeping track of these things. And all of this has kind of come to a pitch where the Producers Guild, or the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers, which represent a lot of the large studios, haven't really come to the table in agreement with a lot of the concerns that the writers and now the actors as well have expressed. Some of them you would think that would be surprising. The one of the provisions in the contract is that the producers want to be able to hire an extra, record their likeness, their movement and everything, and then keep that forever and never pay the actor again. And, this is a hard business to get into. It's hard to get a lot of work. And I would certainly personally be very upset if over the next 5 or 10 years, I keep seeing myself in the background of films that I never worked on.
And that's seeing nothing for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they've done the same thing. Writers have been really kind of knocked down with their ability to work. And I think a lot of the quality of programs that are out there for many of these shows have gone down specifically because they've done cheaper writers, fewer episode counts. I mean, come on, Next Generation, 26 episodes a season. You get like half a year of Star Trek every year, every week a new episode. And now you get like 10 a year, and some stuff goes in between 2 years. And
yeah,
it's very hard for people to make a living under these new conditions. So yes, we are on strike. So technically I can't promote anything, but as this is a review and discussion, as an entertainment journalist, as a guy that's been doing reviews for years, I can still talk about this, but I do appreciate you giving me a moment here, Mark, to kind of remind people this is why we strike. And I apologize that there's going to be a chunk of time where new stuff isn't going to come out. It's going to take a while for this to come together.
You know, I was very upset that a lot of my favorite shows and a lot of my favorite movies are going to be on pause, and because I love watching shows and I love watching movies, and I'm very upset at these goddamn producers for making this strike necessary. And I've been looking up on this strike as well, and I'm like in full support of it. And I've heard it stuff like that. And I don't know if you mentioned the residuals, like the actors who are on Friends, like make like thousands of millions of dollars over residuals because that was a show aired on network television. But now, like, they were talking about the actors on Orange is the New Black, which apparently had more views or more viewership than Game of Thrones, and those actors get nothing. They get like 15 cents or something.
Because you have different, again, the problem, that's the difficulty with streaming now, is before you would license a network, be it syndication or whatever, to show the shows, and then there would be a certain payoff on each episode of residuals that go to the performers. As the show was played, people would make money, and for especially the character actors that you see in everything, this is how they make a living. In between stretches of shows, it's these residuals, it's the work they've already done that's continued to be enjoyed by people that helps them get through in order for the next time, or God forbid, just pay for their health insurance.
And I think it's really, I'm not to get too I'm getting sort of off track or whatever, but I think it's kind of despicable the way these executives are behaving. Like they're broke and they have no money, and yet everyone's looking up their salary. They're making thousands of dollars a day.
Bob Iger saying the actors and the writers' requests are unreasonable. Why he's literally at a billionaire's retreat overlooking the Idaho mountains, which is not the back of Joe Bob's ranch there.
I forgot the exact figure. It was like $78 billion a year or something that he makes personally.
I think it's 27 million considering salary and stock performance things. I mean, that's another thing. It's like you get bonuses when you do a good job. What's the problem with actors or writers asking for a little something when those shows are more popular and they do better?
Yeah, so as I said, I think it sucks that we haven't started it yet because we're still getting all the stuff that was already filmed, but we are going to have a sort of blank, like Strange New Worlds, for example, season 3 that had to halt filming, so that's going to be delayed. A lot of other stuff is going to be delayed, and it's going to suck, but it's necessary because of what these executive producers are, how they're behaving. And just really, they're not, from what I hear, especially about the writer's strike, that they didn't negotiate with the writers like at all for these past like couple of months. Like,
no, they have not come to the table. And that's the thing. It's like, look, this can end at any point. Everybody wants to go back to work. We want to continue to make these things. But we have to have some reasonable out there. It has to be people can't be exploited and slaved out, pardon the intensity of that descriptor, in order to make executives millions or more dollars to buy a second yacht. Netflix got like 5.9 million new subscribers. They were expecting 2.3. They got a huge boost that they weren't expecting, and yet they're coming back saying, "But we don't have any money to pay." And it's just, it's not a lot. I think the big number is like $600 million to cover everything. That's like 2 flashes.
And it's absolutely necessary that these guilds, that these writers and actors do not like give in, because they absolutely need to fight this AI thing. Because if AI takes over, especially in terms of writing, like the quality of everything is going to go down. Like you can't have like the whole concept of having this chat GPT or AI sort of replace writers would just degrade the whole industry. And
Well, yeah.
honestly, yeah.
And what you do with that is you get the AI to write a script, and then you can pay a writer to do a page one rewrite of that script at a much lower rate.
Yeah, it's just a way of screwing the writer over.
Exactly. Or instead of a writer's room for a show, you pay a couple of writers to do some spec, and then you pay another little writers to do a little workshop around that, and boom, for a much lower thing of having no staff, you've now just written out 8 episodes.
Well, yeah, that's another thing the Writers Guild is demanding, writers' rooms, because apparently that's become not a thing anymore when it used to be a thing.
Yeah, and the writer room is where you get the head writers, where you get the showrunners, the people that know how a show is put together and can create a consistency over all episodes. One of the problems you've had in a lot of series shows lately, again, not to detract too much, we'll get to the show shortly, is just a lot of episodes, a lot of series, they feel very piecewise. They feel assembled together as opposed to a consistent whole that has a full arc going through. And a lot of that is because of these facts that you are basically assembling these scripts piecewise with writers and not holding on to a room to be consistent with the entire process. So, yeah. And I think you can tell the difference because an episode like State of Mind, Star Trek, this is their 6th season. They have had writers' rooms. They've got a well compensated, and these people can spend all of the time to really craft an episode that makes some interesting challenges on identity and reality.
Absolutely. Way to bring it back around. And I did want to address Norman Buckwald in the chat that said, I find it quite interesting that Prodigy, the series that has 20 episodes per season, was the one that Paramount Plus pulled and canceled. That is infuriating. Yeah, that not only did they cancel, they pulled it, they ripped it from the Paramount Plus. Now you can't even watch it anymore.
Yeah. Well, so again, I think that was a David Zaslav move, as you realize that, like, oh, if we don't have them on here, we don't have to continue to pay those licensing fees, you know. Oh, now you can never see them together, which is why you get physical copies, folks. Oh,
But, you know, well, my thought on Prodigy specifically, and again, we'll get to Frame of Mind soon, but my thought on Prodigy is that the Paramount told them to finish making season 2. And I don't think they would spend the money to have them complete their season and not air it. Because if they're going to tell them to finish it, they're going to try to air it, but they're just going to try to shop it around to another streaming services so they can make money rather than spend money on it.
exactly. I think you're starting to see all these streaming services either have now the ad-supported version of their stuff, or they've got a freebie, a Tubi, a watch these old shows with ads. I mean, that's where you can find or was it a Westworld is on Tubi now.
Oh, did they rip that off HBO Max? Is it?
Oh yeah, that was gone. Yeah, that was gone first. Right, all these. I mean, go back and check our discussion on Westworld season. But yeah, but they can actually save money that way because then they basically license it out secondhand to another service, even if it's one of their own, that they can then sell ads and they pay a lower residual rate off of that. So each of these basically removes the payouts they have to do to the actors, the writers, producers, and the more that the production company distributor gets to keep these caches, and they're doing well. They're doing really well, just, hey, it takes a team to craft these types of stories and actors, the quality of actors in order to bring it to life. And we just think that everybody should be compensated fairly for the work that they do and not be replaced by computers.
One last thing is because you mentioned the whole downloading the actor, the extra, and using the image repeatedly forever without having to pay a cent. I saw something online which I thought was brilliant that compared it to in the early 2000s how all the studios were up in arms about people downloading movies and shows without permission. Like, oh, you're stealing a product, and I was like, oh, so you think it's a bad thing to like pay for something once and then use it over and over again, where the owners get nothing. And then someone compared it to the ad where it said you wouldn't download a car, and they like changed car to actor. You wouldn't download an actor.
Well, you see, it all depends on what the paperwork says. See, that's all they're focused on. If they get the paperwork to say what they wanted to say, then it's good. And if the paperwork doesn't say what they wanted to say, then it's bad. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and opinionated drone, cool username by the way, brings up that a good point that the pulling all these shows for streaming services, yet you still can get them on pirate sites, so it might see a rise in piracy again because of all this that's going on.
Well, that's true. Are you driving a black market economy here because as the main provider, you don't want to take that small little cut or payout to people in order to have it yourself? It's a very weird philosophy, unless they're the ones running the pirate sites as well for some reason. They get some like ad dollars or download, or they get all of your data that way. I'm not sure. I'm sure they've got something going in both ends of the equation.
And Norman Buckwald says BoJack Horseman was definitely ahead of its time. How they used AI BoJack for that movie was definitely a warning. I forgot about that, and it's funny when I first saw that episode, I'm like, that's the most ridiculous thing ever. They're not going to use AI version of an actor for a movie. Guess I spoke too soon.
Yeah, I mean, James Earl Jones already licensed his voice in perpetuity to Disney or something.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. Well, but he's getting old. It's his voice. He can move on. I kind of understand that. You can't have, Darth Vader suddenly going, "All right, Luke, I'm going to get you, man." Emperor, please.
I'm sure there's some people who could probably do a very close.
That is very true, and in one way, it's a boon to James Earl Jones and his account, but is a takeaway from another actor's possibility. So yeah.
Anyway, let's finally talk about this.
Let's get on with this.
Yeah, let's talk about the episode. We're here to talk about Frame of Mind, which, as I mentioned, is my number 21 on my top 25 favorite episodes of Star Trek. So, what do you think about this episode, Darrin? What were your thoughts?
Well, as I alluded to earlier on, I am a sucker for identity and reality questions. Philosophy has always been kind of a base thing in my heart, and I got to take a great philosophy of mind class when I was in college that dealt along the idea of experience memory. And your reality, your identity is based along the pathways that you could remember of the things that you've done. And it's an interesting thing that they managed to put in with this episode is the fact that he is remembering certain things depending on which reality he is in. And I think Jonathan Frakes does a great job of this, of actually giving each of these characters in this play within a play within a play kind of a different personal characteristic. He's different when he's Will Riker versus when he's the guy in the play versus when he's the guy in the institution. They all have a slightly different reaction and so on. And I think it's a great job that Jonathan Frakes did in this. And I really enjoyed the kind of tempo that they got in his sort of like realizing something's wrong and then what is the real reality and then coming back out of it. I think it's a great episode. The only downside I have is kind of about the ending in some ways, but we'll get to that when we get to that point. But overall, it's a fun episode. I think it takes advantage of being one of those, not a lot of effects, not a lot of expenses outside of building the set. You can really lean into the actors. And this is a 6th season episode. So this is one of those where they get to kind of indulge the actors a little bit, Data always, or Brent Spiner always gets to play multiple characters. It was kind of fun to let see Jonathan Frakes kind of take his own little take on that idea.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere that this was like Jonathan Frakes was not really okay with this idea at first. That he had to be pushed into it. That this was like Brenna Braga. This is I don't know if you're familiar. Brenna Braga is this is his style exactly, and I've talked before about Brennan Braga because he was the showrunner for Voyager in his last 2 seasons and Enterprise in his first 2 seasons, and those seasons were terrible. So I talked before about how I think he's a terrible showrunner, particularly for Star Trek, but he's a good writer. He's a good writer for episodes of Star Trek, especially because of writers' rooms. Bringing back because he has people to play off of. If he has no, in fact, in Enterprise, he didn't have a writers' room. It was just him alone with one other writer, and that's why it wasn't so good for those first 2 seasons. But in shows like TNG, Voyager, he's written some of my favorite episodes. So and this is a prime example and it's his style particularly more than anyone else. And even though I'm sure, as I said, the collaborative effort probably made this episode much better because he also wrote episodes like Threshold from Voyager. Was it the space salamanders or whatnot?
Yeah. I think collaboration really works to the benefit with some creatives. And sometimes you got to be able to someone needs to be able to tell you no. That doesn't make it any worse. It just means that sometimes you're better in some places than others.
Star Wars prequels. Excuse me. Anyway. So, but I love Jonathan Frakes' performances here. I think this is his best performance of the entire show. Personally, this is what I'd pick it out. Now, me personally, like I also have a really strong affinity to mind-bending stories that sort of question reality or bend reality. Like some of my favorite movies, like Lost Highway. Even I'm not a huge Dave Lynch fan, I just love the movie Lost Highway. I think it's so good in bending reality, and Donnie Darko and a few other movies that feel like, or Memento is another good one that like questions reality. And the few sort of modest, very, very extremely modest short films that I wrote and directed were this style of the reality bending style, because it's what I really am attracted to, which is why this has always been one of my favorite episodes of TNG. And plus, when I was a teenager, getting a little bit personal here, but when I was a teenager, one of my biggest fears was being put in a mental institution against my will. Sure. And so I think there's someone in the chat earlier said that they thought the episode The Thaw in Voyager was creepier than this episode, which, yeah, that's fair if that's how you see it. That's not how I see it, though. I like The Thaw. It's a good episode, but to me, this is like way creepier. To me, this really hits, I guess, my own personal fears. Like if you have a fear of sharks, you might think Jaws is the scariest thing ever, or whatever. But for me, this is what really hits my personal fears. And I think the way it really portrays it as a really horrific thing too. When Riker finds himself, he thinks he's trapped in this mental institution, and they really portray it that way. I think it's brilliant. It's like one of the best examples of it. But now, Darrin, I can't wait to get to the ending to see what you had an issue with, because I love the ending.
Sure. I know it's going to be probably a little different than you might expect, but yeah, I mean, and it's what I think one of the interesting approaches that they did in with this episode is the fact that from the beginning, nothing is reality, which I really enjoyed.
Yes.
Because we have, obviously, it starts off with the play itself and that big final scene of whatever the rest of the play is. That's all very intense, and that's always kind of fun because we're used to at this point the holodeck and the musical shows and whatever. The crew does a lot of big things. So it kind of gets us to question like what's going on from the beginning. But and we don't get to see data, so we don't get any confirmation that anything else is known, which I think was a fun way that this was first initially shot. We just get his voice kind of in the background.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So, Norman Buckwald saying, I thought of this episode when Search Part 2 on Deep Space Nine aired and was trying to remember if the villain in question is from Frame of Mind was a hoarder or not. Yeah. So that's Search Part 2 was another episode that was all, well, that was like mechanically induced. That was like the Dominion putting them in this collective dream state. But the thing is like, so this episode is basically, it was a dream the whole time, which in general, like any writing class or any writing structure will say, do not do that. That is a terrible cliche, and it typically is, and is typically, I can't think of any specific examples off the top of my head, but there are some really bad examples, even in modern examples. But this somehow pulls it off. And to me, that is actually even more impressive, that they managed to take something that's usually a death trap and actually do it well. And as you mentioned, Darrin, from the very beginning of this episode, he's in this dream state. Like, we don't, no part of this episode, we don't see reality until the very last scene of the episode, which is another thing I really like.
Yeah. No, that was kind of a great little bit, because we get the play, we get the little break into reality, and then we get to see our, telltale alien, who of course tells us that at that point this has to be a memory. But it does. But you're right, it works because it does establish the setup for the whole episode in a way we as the audience would understand. Oh, he's doing a play. Oh, he's on the Enterprise. Oh, we've got this thing going on. And then something weird that we can then go off of. So yeah, I think it's almost one of those where you appreciate more on the rewatch than on the first watch, because you get to see where the little stuff gets sort of placed.
Yeah. And that's another sign of some of my favorite movies. It's better the second time you watch them, and you want to rewatch it over and over again. Like Memento is very big on that. God, there's so many things. Like, I've watched that movie 30 times and I still pick up new stuff. But anyway, but yeah, I would compare it to most other Star Trek episodes that take place like inside someone's head. Like, I'm thinking of Deep Space Nine, where they had the episode, God, what's it called? Distant Voices, where Bashir imagines himself as, I don't know if you ever saw it. He's like his old man growing old. We find out it was like inside his head the whole time. That episode is terrible. And
yeah, I'm not sure if I'd gotten to that one, but
God, it's not good. And then there's one in season 7 where they go inside Sloane's head, Section 31 guy, to get information. And that, I mean, it's not the worst episode ever, but it's not particularly good, because it feels like when you're inside someone's head, it's too like orderly. It's too like, oh, there's walking into this room, they're talking to this person. Where here it's so chaotic, the way it's back and forth. And I think that's what helps sells that it's inside someone's head. That is not a simple, oh, this represents that or this represents that. It's controlled chaos, I would say, because there's a purpose to the chaos that's going on, but it's not orderly, if you know what I'm saying. Because I think in general, as far as TV and movies, when they tend to represent dreams or show dreams, they get it wrong because it is too straightforward and dreams are chaotic.
Right. Well, they also always overdo the Dutch camera angles and everything.
Oh God! Or the fog machine.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is kind of fun because it does it in a nice, quick way. In the blinks, look up and then suddenly the changes, or the one room does, and then look back, and then what you just saw suddenly changes back to something else. they do that nice, and I think they also commit to their change once they do, and then they spend a little time in that reality. The opening play scene was really nice, and then we got that break where Riker loses his line for a moment, and you see him suddenly pop through there. Oh, wait a minute. And then we get to move on to our next, and then we spend time on the Enterprise, and then all of a sudden it breaks again, and then we get to spend a good chunk of time in the institution. And I think that kind of committal to once you're in a place, you're there for a little while, helps us as the audience start to accept this. So then when it changes again, we get to be kind of shocked the same way that Riker is.
Now, I did want to address Jordan Johnson in the chat, who's asking me, would this episode have been better if they put Frakes in makeup to make him look like one of the aliens in the mental hospital? I actually don't think so. I think that actually adds the fact that everyone in the mental hospital happens to be the same alien, and he's seeing that same alien guy on the Enterprise who seems out of place, adds to the creepiness and the out of place-ness of it. And the fact that he's not that alien also tells you something's off. So I actually like that. I think it's a nice touch that he actually appears human.
Yeah, I think it would have been a distraction. It also would have been a break enough. I think keeping him human allows us to continue that journey without the like, oh, obviously this is fake. I mean, we know that it's fake, but we get to take the journey with him because he is kind of himself outside of his reactions and how he responds to the changes in the world, which is one of the fun little differences he puts into each of the characters that Riker is playing, depending on the world that he's in.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the chat, Brandon saying, having just got out of the hospital a few days ago, I had trouble watching Frame of Mind once, which is fair. I was in the hospital a couple months ago, but that was only for one day. And even then, it was like, yeah, I can imagine how this episode would be hard to watch. And Opinionated Drone says Ala Moraine. Yeah. Don't. No, it's not related to that episode. Jeez. And Norman Buckle said, if he was in makeup, we would have thought of First Contact. Think they made the right call for him looking human. Actually, that's a good point. You would think he was undercover as one of these aliens, which I believe in the actual episode in the storyline he was undercover as an alien. But I like how in the stream sequence he wasn't.
Yeah, I gotta say that is probably my one little kind of like, critique from the beginning point is like, look, you should never have been on your own to look out for this Federation research group in this giant, which is like, that's like 200 square kilometers, that southeast section of the city. It's like, and they're sending one guy? You gotta have backup, man. Come on. But it works for the episode.
All right, so real quickly, let's go through this episode. So it starts with him putting on the performance, doing the acting, and it's interesting that, I mean, it's kind of coincidental. It's like the what happens in the Hollywood TV shows or what, they just so happens to be doing a play about mental, disabilities and a disreputable, shall we say, mental institution, one that's actually it seems like this play is meant to make a statement on mistreatment of people with mental illness, and it's probably looking at it from a historical perspective since this takes place in the 24th century. And yeah, it's a big, huge coincidence that it just so happens that he's doing that right before he has this incident. But it is really interesting because, well, I'm going to just talk about the ending throughout this because why not? We've all seen this. But because this is basically just his mind pulling on recent memories to try to make himself aware of the danger that he's in. And it's doing it in sort of this dream state way. And so it's pulling on his memories of him being in this play about horrible treatment of people with mental disabilities. and so it's portraying it in a very horrific way.
Sure.
And it starts out, and of course, the episode itself starts out kind of normal, but things progressively get worse, which is amazing. Um, and so, do you have any thoughts on just the play in general, or on the setup of the episode?
No, I think it's great because you're right. We are from the beginning. This is him pulling these recent memories in order to help his mind deal with the mental assault that's going on by these. I'm just gonna say aliens. I can't remember. Is it Thelosians? I can't remember the planet name. Um,
Mm.
but so this is, and in a way, it's like he's starting out as him, and then as he breaks down into the mental institution, that's almost the mental attack getting him to question his reality so he can pull out specific memories. Even that reflection therapy is like, we want you to call up these certain parts of yourself. And is this how mentally the alien probe is going through Riker's reality, that as he goes back and forth from the play into the institution into back onto the Enterprise, it's like this is where the aliens are winning, this is where Riker's consciousness is winning, and it's all that question. As long as he can kind of give up his own identity, then ultimately we could believe that the aliens, win and break through to his mind to extract whatever information that they have. So it's kind of funny. As I said, it's an interesting way once you have watched it, when you do rewatches, to see how they have sort of paced up each of these scenes and each of these moments. Are you getting support from the world around you, or do you have a guard antagonizing you to get you to submit into this lack of reality? I think they do an interesting way in setting that up. My only kind of real critique, and we'll just get to in the way that it ends, is it's almost too quick of a denouement. It's like he wakes up, he gets rescued, and then it's like Picard going, yes, well, this seemed to have happened, and it's bad, and that's a whole thing, but it's all wrapped up. And then he's like, I like him taking apart the play. He's got to
Mm.
construct that whole thing from his mind. I don't know. In some ways, I was almost like if they had wrapped it up in a way where you're still questioning where he was, that they give that a little bit of an interesting kind of twist, or even drag it out, because this had such a big impact to him. It would have been interesting to see that this is not something he immediately wraps up, but sits with him a little bit. And I know we've previously had, it was early in the season where we had Chain of Command, right? So we had Picard going through his whole thing, plus the whole Locutus, and then when he gets back and he has to have that whole scene with his brother in the vineyard wrestling about accepting reality. It would have been interesting to see this sit with Riker a little bit longer. So either, it's got its bigger impact, or, if they just did something tiny just to think like, is he still in there? Is there something up?
Yeah, but that's the problem with Next Generation in general.
Sure.
It's too much of the episodic nature of it. I think if it was something done in modern times and like in the style of Strange New Worlds, then they would touch on the after effects of this, and like has a side plot in the future.
For sure. This would definitely have gone over, had with a pre-episode with a play, and then they would have done the thing, and then, they would have stretched this out into a bigger thing, which is, in a way, the nice stuff about TNG in some ways, is it does have these compact little episodes that you could enjoy. It was obviously just like, all right, look, we got like 3 minutes left in the episode.
Yeah.
We got to wrap this up and have him just do something quick to show he's okay, so we can move on to next week.
Well, I did like the scene where he was tearing down the stage.
Yeah.
As a therapeutic thing. I think that was a nice touch.
You should have just been more crazy about it. I gotta rip it down. It's just like, and we'll pop this up and set this. Yeah.
But one thing I'm glad they didn't do too much of a fake out, like I'm out, and him not actually being out. Like
that is true.
There is some other episodes and other movies that do that too much, where they try to fake you out, be like, it's over. Ah, it's not really over. And because they did that to a small extent when they had Worf and Data snatch him and bring him back to the Enterprise, because you're thinking, oh, he's back to the Enterprise, everything's good. But it's not. You like he can still sense something's wrong. So I'll just say, like, my take on this episode as a whole, I don't know if you have a different take or maybe not, is that everything that's happening that we see on screen is all his mind trying to make him aware that someone is messing with him and trying to steal his memories and that he needs to wake up. And so that's why it's making him uneasy, because when he's on the Enterprise and he thinks everything is fine, that's not good, because he's just going to stay complacent. So it's pulling on recent memories to try to tell him something's wrong. And so that's why he's experiencing stuff like being in this mental institution where they're trying to convince him he murdered someone, and he sees imagery of, and when he sees someone who thinks is going to help him get out, she claims to be another Starfleet officer. She's just crazy as well. Yeah. But then if he gets too complacent of being in this mental institution by itself, then that's also wrong. So they flip it from the ship to the mental institution back and forth, so he gets a sense that this isn't like actual reality and that he needs to wake up. And there's like different clues, such as I like how, by the way, the Lieutenant Suna, which is the name I took, who was actually the guy in real life who was running these experiments on him, how he's not like a main character in his fantasies, that he's just this weird image or that he sees repeatedly. He doesn't actually say much until the very end,
right?
When he tries to convince him everything's okay, and that's when Riker gets the sense that this is the image he needs to fight against. And yeah, so that's my take on this episode.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that was kind of a nice thing, and it sets us up again from the beginning when we see Lieutenant Suna coming out of the elevator, like, okay, well, they've got that weird face in, face out to know that we're in this automatically. And I like the fact that, again, we've had episodes where we've got kind of like the mustache, the twirling mustache villain or the overarching guy. I like the fact that he is just in the background, because as Riker's laying there on the table, he is just there in the background. If you think about what the reality of that situation is, that he's the one overlooking, then that's where his psyche is pulling out this kind of overwatch guy. I think was all very cool. And yeah, I love the distortions. Like I said, that's one of the fun things that I liked about even how Frakes played this is, when he's Riker. But when things happen, he just gets confused. Like, what's happening? Which is why I love that kind of little bit where he's in the middle of the play later on, and he's doing the play guy, and then suddenly sees the guard's face in the window there, and he's Riker, who is now just confused about what's going on.
Yeah.
Whereas the guy, in the play, when something happens, he's overreactive. He's almost like the bombastic, bigger player. And when he's in the hospital, he's much more nervous. He is uncertain. Everything happens, and he's not sure what reality is in that. And that was a fun little take that I think gave that extra little bit of life. Is those are the aspects going on? Is it the strong Riker character who's just confused what's happening, or is it the uncertain guy who is going to be more victimish in this?
Yeah, I just want to address the chat where Opinionated Drone says this episode hits some of the same notes as the whole Cisco/Benny thing in DS9. And Brandon says, yes, but I think Avery Brooks does chew the scenery a tad too much. And I, of course, agree with, with Brandon on this one. He goes, it's real! Don't you understand? It's real! It's a bit... Don't get me wrong, I like that episode, but yeah, he sure does chew the scenery. And I think Jonathan Frakes does actually a really good job. It doesn't come off as too over the top or scenery chewing.
No, I think that's the nice thing is where Avery, and I love Avery, does true a little bit of scenery. It's fun because when Riker has those moments, he actually downplays it. And I think that
Mm.
makes it more real.
Okay, so there, I got to bring up the one over the top moment from Jonathan Frakes, and it's something that me and my sister would always make fun of when this episode first came out. Is that scene you were talking about when he's doing the play and he's seeing like the guard in the window and he starts freaking out, and he looks over to Picard and Troy and no one's there, and he looks again, and all of a sudden that Lieutenant Suno is there, so he goes over to him, grabs him, and he goes, "Whoa!" And we always did like this. It looks like he sticks his lower lip out like, who are you? And that was a little bit over the top.
Sure, sure, and I agree with that. But that's also a kind of, I don't know. I think it works because this is those three realities. This is the one scene where those three realities really collide.
Yes, yeah.
You know, is he in the hospital? Is he in a play? Is he in there? And it's that, that kind of one. And look, it's Star Trek. It's Next Generation. It has its own level of melodrama, which again normally works. I just think that's one of the nice things that Frakes does in this. While he has these big overreactive moments, some of the other moments where he could do the same thing, he chooses instead to drop into kind of like, wait, what was that? As opposed to what was that? Kind of thing. It's almost the reverse Kirk, which I think is nice because it's like that feels real, and therefore it makes each of those realities feel a little realer. It's like he had to figure out how he was going to be each person, and then just crank those dials up or down a little bit more to just add that extra distinctive difference.
And I sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, which just all collided with, who are you? It's like, which reality is it now?
No, I do like that. I do think it is arguably an over the top performance, but I think it's appropriate.
Sure,
I think it works because it does show just how the craziness of that moment and how he's sort of losing it. And what I love about this episode is the progression, though. I think that it's beautiful, the pacing, like how it progresses, how it gets worse and worse and worse. I think it slows, for me, it slows down a bit when he's first in the mental institution and the guard's talking about how he killed someone and that lady starts talking to a spoon.
Sure.
Maybe that part maybe drags out a little bit too long for me, but I think it's probably necessary though because as I said, the pacing's perfect, how they go slow at first, but then they ramp it up as it goes. Like for me, talking from the standpoint of a horror episode, which I actually, when I did my top 10 horror episodes of the Star Trek franchise, and this was on my top 10. From the horror standpoint, the scene where he's like running down the corridors and he runs into that lady who says, from the crazy lady who's talking to the spoon, runs into her saying, don't let them tell you you're crazy. Yes. And then he starts running and the music is amping up and he runs back to his quarters. And as soon as he steps in, he's back in the cell and he freaks out screaming, let me out of here. Like, to me, I get chills just talking about that. To me, that is one of the creepiest horror sequences like ever that I have ever seen.
Well, and I think they do a fun thing with that. I mean, I don't know how you saw it, but yeah, that's almost one of those. I was expecting him to run into the fake reality that there's going to be a switch, and they almost just delay it a half beat longer than you expect him to, because I almost expect when he opens his door, he's going to run into his cell, and he doesn't. It's his room. It's when he turns back around and hears the door closed that he realizes that's the cell behind him.
It's he hears this cell door closing and then turns around and sees, like, that's as you mentioned, the editing in that.
Yeah,
I think
that was a brilliant little choice right there, because again, it's that little bit more where you almost go, oh, he's gonna be okay. No, and then part of your brain is like, oh, you knew it was gonna happen. Like, yeah, I know, but I thought he was gonna. So yeah, it plays with your own expectations as well, which I think again works really well. Opinionated drone? No, Jonathan Frakes did not direct this episode.
Do you have the name right
It's
now?
James L. Conway.
Oh yes, yeah.
He did he did a chunk of stuff. He did some I think DS9 after this, or Voyager, and yeah.
He did quite a few TNG episodes, didn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he did a nice little bit. Then he went on. He did some episodes like Smallville after that, and The Magicians. So still working.
Hold on, I'm looking him up in his IMDb right now. I want to see what episodes he directed of TNG specifically. 3 episodes only. Hold on.
Oh.
Because this is familiar. He did. Just give me 1 second. He did. Oh yeah, this is why I recognize him, because I just reviewed one of the episodes he did. He did Justice from season 1 and The Neutral Zone from season 1.
Okay.
And then this episode.
Just a little 5 season break in between.
Yeah. Oh, and on Deep Space Nine, he directed Duet.
Okay.
Which, do you know which episode that is?
It is familiar in my stuff. I'm trying to recall everything that did. I remember it being good. It's one, yeah, because Norman, I saw you brought that up, and I was like,
everyone who knows me knows that will be at the top of my top 25 that we're doing towards the top there.
I'm gonna have to do a rewatch then. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's the episode where Kira like finds this Cardassian like labor camp war criminal and is like interrogating him. So it's just, and so I think that's like the common thing with this director, that he's very good at doing an actors type episode.
Okay.
Because what else did he do? He did The Way of the Warrior, Little Green Men. Little Green Men was silly. But anyway.
He has to have one in the group. It can't just be mental torture.
But yeah, I think, and I was reading about him, like he was doing stuff like, I think MacGyver or something before. Yeah, he did MacGyver before he did TNG.
Okay, then I already like him.
Yeah. But yeah, that's so yeah. So I think, yeah, this episode is definitely a combination of great writing, great directing, great acting. It's just all coming together.
Yeah, they do a lot. And again, while I, have certain, might criticize, no, the ending, I think could have been a little better. They could have made a little twist. They could have a little more. The fact that they really only have like 3 minutes to wrap it all up at the end, they use their time very well. They tell a lot of story, and I think it works, like as you said, is with their pacing of starting out slow and doing the quick bits. And even though in some ways it can be cheesy, I've got to agree in the chat, the reality shattering around as he breaks through layers at the end. He blows the phaser, and then that blows up, and then the background blows up, and it's everybody in the audience watching him, and then he explodes as he tries to run out. Maybe a little Doctor Who-ish, and it's cheesy, but I really like it. It's that we're shattering realities around us.
I love that scene so much. Like, I'm not familiar with Doctor Who, so I don't know if it's similar to that or not, but I don't find it cheesy at all. I think it's brilliant. I love it. Well, it's cheesy, but in a way that works.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So
again, you're shattering reality. It's pretty nail on the head, but it does work.
But I like how, all right, so let's start back when he's taken from the mental institution by Worf and Data. He's put in a sick bay, so you think, and this is, as I said, the good sleight of hand the show does. You think, oh, everything's fine, but he can tell something's still off and something's still wrong, and he's and they're trying to Crusher and Picard are trying to say, oh, we found you, everything's fine, and he's not really believing them because his head keeps bleeding, and she repairs it, and he's like, it still hurts, it's still bleeding, and when she's saying, no, calm down, everything's fine, he's like, I don't believe you, takes a phaser, shoots himself, and then he shatters and ends up back in the mental hospital. Or like, that's not a phaser, that's a knife. And then he shoots someone and he like shatters in that same effect. And it's like, well, if this is a knife, what the hell happened to that guy? He's like, well, that's complicated.
I know, I love that little bit. Don't worry about that. That's not important.
And so then he shoots the wall, the scene. Oh yeah, he sets the phase. He says he's setting to wide dispersal, so it should like destroy the whole building. And instead, he ends up back in the play. But the Suna is still there, trying to convince him everything's okay. And this is the part I love, is when he realizes that Suna's lying. And when he says, I don't believe you, and everyone starts clapping. And then he like, no, pushes him, and they like stand up, standing ovation. Like, I love that so much. It is cheesy and its simplicity, but it's a beautiful metaphor for his subconscious trying to pull him in the right direction, trying to say, yes, you're figuring it out. And so that symbolizes they had the people clapping for his subconscious telling him, yes, this isn't right, this isn't reality, you're figuring it out, keep going. Like, and I just think that's brilliant. It's the kind of storytelling I really love.
No, it's great. And as Norman points out, Norman in the chat, I love that the characters from the mental institution were there in the audience, also giving Riker a standing ovation.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. So no, that's an excellent point there. It's Mirror Odo shatters in DS9. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
But it was
Norman. I'll have to rewatch that episode.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I see if it's the same.
Yeah. But I think the point is that it's still it gives you that same thing. It is his sort of subconscious, and as he even breaks through layers. And I love that one bit where he does the same. He's like, "Oh, sorry, everything's fine. You're there with an institution." He still has the phaser in hand. He's like, "Okay, well, if that's not real, why do I still have a phaser in my hand?" That's definitely, it's the small bits where it's like, we've got to get him out of here. But it is a great progression of these realities. We're confused, and then the audience cheering him on for his resistance. I think was a great little bit. So yeah.
Now, another thing I really want to talk about is another one of my favorite bits of the episode is the whole bleeding from the head thing. Because this is what really rings true of what dreams are like in reality. Because as I said, most television movie representation of dreams are like totally off and seem unrealistic. But this touches on something very simple, because if I'm sure many people experience this, if you have something like a cut or something in your arm that's uncomfortable, or something that's causing you pain, maybe you have an IV in your arm or something, and you're dreaming, that pain is represented in the dream. And if you do something to try to get rid of it in the dream, of course, that's not going to affect you in reality. So you keep experiencing that pain, so that even though you take something out, it comes back again in your dream because it's still there in reality. I also think it's kind of similar. Like, I've had dreams recently where I really need to pee, and in my dream I go use the toilet, but in reality, thankfully, I'm not actually peeing. So, but in my dream, I'm not relieved. It still feels like I need to pee, no matter how much I try to pee. It's not going away. So it's similar to that, and that's why it rings so true. And I love, because at first the dream represents it as Worf slicing him in the head, and then it's starts bleeding for no reason, and the mental institution guys try to, that's because you were hit in the head or something. And as I already mentioned, the scene in sick bay where Crusher heals it, but she keeps healing it, but it doesn't stop bleeding, doesn't stop hurting. That's because in reality, that's exactly where the thing is hooked up to his head. Right. And so that's where the pain's coming from. So in the dream, no matter what you do to try to relieve it, of course, in reality, it's still going to be there. And I love that really subtle touch.
Oh yeah, and it gives you, again, it's that one consistent through line from the beginning in through on. They keep giving reasons and whys this is happening, but it is the one kind of consistent thing. Again, like Lieutenant Suna showing up these were reminders that something is continually going on. There is some consistency in all of these worlds, something that's trying to pull you out. So yeah, I thought that was a great way for him to finally break and realize that the reality isn't reality.
Yeah, so then yeah, it is the one. Okay, so the nitpick I do have, which I don't think you mentioned, is when he wakes up in actual reality, he rips the thing off, and the guy's like, "Oh no, he's gaining consciousness," and he moves over, grabs the knife and his communicator, and like holds the knife out and calls the ship to beam him up. Why do they have his knife and communicator in that same room right next to him?
You start. All of your items go in immediately in positions. I know it's been 2 days, but they didn't have time to do that. Get him down. He's drugged out. He's not going to get up. They didn't even put it in the little Ziploc bag, which would have been a real intense moment of him getting up, like, yeah, no, that's it. Would have detracted from the drama right there.
Yeah, true. I mean, it's a plot contrivance for sure. I mean, they could have at least locked it in the drawer. That's all I'm saying. Maybe keep it in a different room.
Now, it was after this star date where transdermal transponders became de rigueur for undercover away missions. Don't they have the transponders that can track you that they always put underneath the skin? Or I know this is season 6, so it's pretty far along in there.
I think those things were in Enterprise. Like, I think those things were like always a thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, see. Well, Riker here. Commander, is everything all right? No, I've been gone for 2 days, man. You haven't heard anything. Get me the hell out of here. No, but that's fine. I mean, again, it's simple. It gets him out. They get to do the emergency transport. Get me out of here, and he goes. It was quick enough. Though I do like that we get that final little like handset from the alien there, Lieutenant Suna.
Oh yeah,
almost had that. Again, it's next
I was
generation.
just thinking about that, but what they maybe should have just cut the scene sooner. Is probably what, because there's nothing they could really do with them that wouldn't come off like that. Like, that's probably the best they could do. The show is frustration. They go,
yeah, as I say, at that point, and again, if they're using most of the time to tell the story, and this is the 3 minutes they have to wrap it all up, they choose the imagery and moments that work the best. He escapes, alien frustrated, he's been thwarted, Picard telling him that everything's okay, and then we're going to tear down the set to, release this from my mind. I did like that. I don't think I could sleep knowing that this was still up, considering that I've been in there for the
moment. Yeah.
So it does a perfect job of wrapping everything up in the episodic way. This is how storytelling was done in the 80s and 90s and so on. In its episodic format, is we want to end everything up so it can begin effectively anew from the next episode.
Yeah, I did want to address Brandon in the chat saying that it's like that TNG episode where Worf, Troy, and a couple other people are abducted into another dimension. Help me with names, people. I can never pronounce this correctly, so pardon me for my pronunciation, but it's something like schisms or schisms or schisms, something along those lines.
Schisms is a word, so I think that's the right
so it's probably it. Yeah. I was actually, for a moment, I thought you were talking about the episode Eye of the Beholder, the season 7 episode where Troy is experiencing a mental delusion so it's kind of similar, where it's a dreamlike state where she's like having an affair with Worf, and all of a sudden he's cheating on her and laughing at her or something. That was a stupid episode. but the Schisms one that was also creepy, but I think I never really, I don't know, it came off as kind of boring to me. Like, it was creepy, but I didn't think they did enough with it. I think an episode like this was actually much better.
I think the Troy Worf relationship just didn't work for me. But
No, it absolutely did not. Although Parallels is a good episode. That's the one, but that's because they were only in a relationship in a parallel universe, not in
yeah,
the
well, again, you could do that. I'm just talking about from main canon universe. Didn't he get? Didn't he have a relationship with Dax on DS9?
What's that?
Did Worf have a relationship with Dax on DS9 or no?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, he did.
Okay. I was gonna say, I'm like, well, he had a better one that I liked. I say I like that one a little bit more.
Yeah, no,
However,
yeah, the Worf and Dax one was really good.
yeah, no, I think that worked a lot better. So besides, it was supposed to be Troy and Riker. We all knew it. You just had to wait for until Picard for them to find it and get together.
Yeah. What, Troy and Riker?
Yeah.
Oh no, they got together in Nemesis. No, they got married in Nemesis. They got together in Insurrection.
They went back and forth a few times. Yeah, it's been so long since I've seen Nemesis. I don't know. It's not.
Yeah. No, they got together in Insurrection because he shaves his beard, and then they got married in Nemesis. That's what it was.
Yeah. First Contact still the best. Okay, we can move on.
Well, I'm not a fan of First Contact, but anyway.
Okay, that's fair. Actually, I don't know if the TNG movies ever worked. For me, it's like that's the series show. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's my take on it too. Like TNG is better as a show. It's better as a show. It doesn't work as well as movies, which is what the issue I had with Picard season 3 because they were modeling it off of movies rather than show, and the TNG works much better as a show than the movies. Sure. TOS works better as movies, but that's different.
Very true. Very true.
Strange anyway.
Worlds. Strange. Sorry.
Anyway, I think we about covered this episode. I think we covered everything in it. The wonderful, beautiful ending. I suppose, like, I get what you're saying about how it ended too quickly, but to me, like, I think the point of it was the crazy dream stuff, and once you're out of it, it would seem a bit anticlimactic to go for a bit too long.
No, I think this is definitely one of those. This is a younger me versus older me kind of thing because it's completely effective. It does work in it all. It does sort of wrap things up. I just think that me as an older, more hopefully slightly evolved storyteller, like the idea of leaving a little drop, a little kind of something extra where it's not, even as a moment, even if he took that last moment of taking apart that stage, they spent another 10, 15 seconds on it of kind of a reflexive thing or really pulling out. Again, I don't know. Or again, if you want to mind mess, since you've been mind messing with everybody the whole episode, leave a little kind of trait there at the end that makes you go like, no, he's out, right?
I wouldn't like that. To be honest, I wouldn't like that. I think sometimes that kind of ambiguous thing can work, and sometimes it doesn't. I think here it wouldn't really work.
Sure.
Like,
and I totally get that. It's the same. Just, I guess because it does just like, okay, episode ends, wrap it up, move on. It's like, I wish you could have just played a little bit more with that wrap up. Just something.
I get what you're saying, but for me, the taking apart the stage was enough for me. Like, I think that was maybe I would have liked a little bit more. Actually, I think maybe that I have more of an issue, I suppose, with the conversation that he has with Picard and Troy. I think maybe they could have done more than just that. That seems like a very quick way of them saying, oh, here's exposition. We're explaining what's happening in the episode really quick, and now the episode's over. The one line I really didn't like was when Troy said, oh, your mind was showing you these different places to keep you grounded, to keep you sane. I'm like, No, it wasn't.
No.
Like that wasn't my take. It wasn't trying to keep him sane. It was trying to make him insane in order to realize that something is not the way it should be, that something's wrong, and that he needs to wake up.
Yeah, and and that might have been a little thing too, just to show that the struggle's a little bit more. I think again, the Pat kind of, oh, that was just you trying to keep yourself nuts. Done. As opposed to mine does a lot of things to, wrestles with a lot of thoughts and pushes and pulls in there. These are some of the effects. Again, just give that little bit of an extra like weight to it, I guess. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm glad when he was like, I got to clean up the stage. He didn't pick up the chair he had, just start banging. That would have been way too much. I'm not saying that at all.
I think the one complaint I will say about Jonathan Frakes' performance is in that scene where he was taking apart the stage. I think he seemed too okay. He seemed
exactly
too composed. I think he should have been a bit more. It should have had more of a sense of like relief of God, thank God, let's get this. Like not sort of an anger, like ripping it down, but sort of a cathartic experience.
Yeah. I think that would have been the perfect kind of little wrap up. You're right, because he does. I think that's what it is. It's like, and we start to take the steps. Like I'm expecting to like stack the pieces in the corner, from largest to smallest, nice and orderly. The way he started going after that, and yeah, I think there should be more of should have just felt more of a cathartic release.
And maybe we needed a scene with him going to Crushers, like you did this to me by making me do this crazy play.
I just look, you wrote this play.
All right, I had to mention the chat because there's good stuff going on the chat where Brandon says, after this chat, I'm going to talk to my spoon for a few minutes. And then Norman says, talking to your starship again, Brandon. And Brandon's response, afraid so, man. That's such a cool line though when the guy came up talking to your starship again, because you really feel that because Riker you think, oh, this is Riker. He's in an alien facility. This lady says she's a Starfleet officer. Maybe she is. She's going to contact Starfleet and beam them up. You totally believe that. And so she whips out a spoon and starts talking to him. It's such a great way of subverting expectations.
That's right, because there's too many of the same aliens from too many different ships. That's just not how that works out. Should have been at least one other Klingon, maybe a Ferengi in there. Yeah. I know, not a lot of Ferengi in Starfleet. I know. I'm just saying. No.
I suppose in response to us saying that, being mad at Crusher for writing the play, Norman says, don't worry, Crusher will get a Candle Ghost next season. Leave her alone!
It's the end of the show at that point. They're just trying to put episodes out. They want to have their fun. Okay, we're going to have sexy ghost time.
And Opinionated John says, just remember there is no spoon. Now you're getting your franchises crossed.
See, I was going to make a Tick reference right there, but
I'm not sure. Oh, I don't remember that reference. You've watched that show so long. Yeah,
that was his battle cry. The spoon.
Oh, was it? Okay. Yeah. I'm just waiting for someone to bring up the Cardassian racial slur of Spoonhead. But anyway, okay. So we can wrap things up. I think we've pretty much well covered this episode. So, gonna ask my guest question I always ask Darrin: if you had your own personal top 25 best episodes of Star Trek, just speculating, would you have this episode higher, lower, or around the same as where I have it here at number 21?
It would probably be a higher number than 21 on mine. Again, well, I like the episode, and I do like a lot of things that they do.
Wait, so just to clarify, higher means closer to number one.
Okay, so lower number then.
Lower,
The
okay.
other way. Yes. I know. I was thinking the X. I'm like higher, like number sequence or
Yeah.
sequence.
So yeah, just thinking the way that number one is the highest,
Sure,
and
sure.
yeah,
If we're looking at that way, it probably would be a little lower number. I mean, I don't know. I haven't watched all the episodes of Enterprise, so I'm not really sure where I'm going to rank those out in my.
oh, they'll all be low.
It, I know.
No, there's a few good ones.
I haven't watched any episodes there. It's been a long time.
Getting from there to here, anyway.
Sorry, folks. I really don't mean to. I do mean to do it. I'm being horrible. I'm sorry. Again, while it's got a lot of stuff, I don't know. I'd have to kind of go in it, but I just again, while it has a lot of fun stuff that's kind of with it, I don't think that all of it hits to the point of some of the other episodes from the shows, which I think have a little bit of a bigger impact on me. I mean, again, I'd have to do kind of a big rewatch watch, but I would manage to be a little bit lower, probably not too far. Because again, it's definitely good, and like I said, I'm a sucker for identity issues and things like that. But I can see where it is on your list, because I do have to say, I think I do. Each time we do one of these, I'm like, yeah, this episode was a little better than the one before. It did have a little bit more to offer. So I totally see why this is here on your list.
Yeah, and that's totally fair, and I did get that, and I've heard there's a sizable amount of people who actually really hated this episode. That surprised me. Some people really didn't like this episode, but for me, as I said, I've always been a sucker for the mind twisty, mind bending stuff. Just going to point out in the chat, they're saying, "Dinner light that candle." That's how that is the correct way to pronounce it. Anyway, so that's it. So Darrin, if you want to give a quick shout out of where people can find you and what you're up to.
Yeah, I've got a channel called D's Reviews. We're in the midst of our Secret Invasion review. Mark was on a couple of weeks ago to talk. It's a little tougher doing these discussions during the strike, but like I said, since these are technical reviews and opinions, it falls under entertainment journalism. I'm allowed to do it under my SAG contract as long as I am not promoting a show. And I'll give you a heads up. In any of my discussions at this point, I am not in any way can be seen as promoting Secret Invasion. If you would like to know why, last one's going to be this Thursday night at 6:00 over on D's Reviews, that specific time. Then we'll take in a break, maybe do an Ahsoka in some ways. It kind of depends on how this whole strike thing goes. Because I'm expecting to like Ahsoka, and I don't want to be promoting a show for Bob Iger because I don't like a lot of the stuff he's doing right now. And it's not the fault that they're doing too much. It's the fault that their quality is going down because they're not paying people fairly.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Well, no, that's cool. I forget what. Oh, Secret Invasion. Yeah, I think that's I'm not enjoying it.
No. There's a lot of great potential that was in with that show. And sadly it's the same type of thing. There's no showrunner for this show. This has just a head writer, and it's being shot like a film, like you were talking about the final show of a season of Picard. This is a 6-hour movie as opposed to a 6-episode series. And arcs and storylines and stuff move differently in that sense. And there are some great moments that are in this, but it doesn't tie together well at all. And
I think. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think the issue is that it's a 6-hour movie. I think they could do really good things with a 6-hour movie.
Oh, sure.
They just haven't.
No, there's not a good consistent vision through it. And at this point, they've really kind of fallen back on just tropes and, evil villain does things because they're evil. And, look, that's Marvel always had a great reputation for quality because they spent time to do things, and when they put it out, it was done right. And there were some hits and there were some misses, but there was a kind of consistency and purpose of vision. And I don't think a lot of the shows have had that lately. And I think that that's a directly result of not investing in the creators in a way to do the most for your product, which is silly to me because if you do a good job with the product, people will want to see it, and then they'll want to see more of your stuff.
Exactly.
Which, I mean, that's a win-win right there. So
Yeah.
I don't really understand this move outside of money now better than don't know later.
Yep, pretty much. All right. If you're finding me for the first time, my name's Mark. My channel is Enchantment of Eternity. As I said, I'll be here every month counting down my top 25 favorite episodes of Star Trek. And I'm also covering Star Trek The Next Generation, episode by episode, and season 1 at the moment, which is not so good, but still covering it. And exactly. And also covering Strange New Worlds. Now, those who may be aware, there was a surprise dropped a new episode over the weekend for Comic-Con for the Lower Decks crossover episode, which I so adore. I'm going to be covering that episode tomorrow. So my review for that episode will be coming out tomorrow. And apparently they're showing a new episode next Thursday as well. So they're going straight into a new episode. So I'll be back covering that. And and that's what's going on my channel at the moment. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check me out. Check out Darren's channel. And we'll see you all next time.
Thanks. Bye.
As soon as I get my mouse to work.
I know. We got to hit like a bunch of buttons in order to turn this off.